And as you know, mappings are an important part of integrations. I look at integration having three parts. One is access to apps. The second one is the logic to decide when and what to process. And the other big part of integrations is mappings and transformations, because you're getting the data from one system and the other system does not expect the data in the same way. So there's mapping and transformation involved. Mapping is just moving data from one side to another, but a plain mapping may not always be useful, because you may have to do a transformation as you do the mapping. So for example, a very simple case is in one system, the currency may be called USD, and in the other one, it may be called US dollar. For example, with NetSuite, you have country codes are very different. They have an underscore and then something and something. Is very difficult to kind of figure out what their scheme is, but you should know that it is different. So in one system it may be a different code, and in the other system it's a different code. In some cases it's a number on one side and it's a actual text on the other side. So transformation is very important. Sometimes it's a combination of fields. In one system it may be first name, last name. In another system it may be just one field called name. So that's where we we come into this topic, mappings and transformations. And as always, let me just point out to some of the other things which are there. You can find a lot of help if you go to our support site, which is support.workato.com. And if you go to the solutions page, you will find a lot of, if you do a search here, you can find a lot of topics on formulas and how to map and so on. So that's a good place to go. Also on the support site is this thing called forum, and you can look under Q&A, ideas, etc., and you can find stuff. And the last but not the least is this docs.workato.com, where we have tried to capture as much information as possible. So today's topics that I'll be covering will be under this data types and formulas. Most of them are covered there, but some of them may not be. But this is a comprehensive site. The docs.workato.com is a comprehensive site for looking at information regarding Workato. So going back to my topics. So the first thing when you talk about mappings is, what is data representation? What are the different types of data elements that we have? So we have text, number, date, phone. So if you go to a recipe, let's just go to one of these guys here, and you will see that on this side you have this different types of, there's ABC, which is a text, and then you have a phone, which is a phone, and then there's a date, which is a birth date. So there are different types, and then it should also have some, let's see, it's in the opportunity, you will have numbers. So this is a number, amount is a number, and so on. So there are these different types of data elements which are there, and depending on what the data type is, the transformation that you want to do with it may be different. Some other things to note here is that when I was showing you this thing here, and you see this data next to it, 2017-05-31, closed is true. Now, sometimes people look at this data and they think that, this is the exact data that I'm going to be processing right now. So I just want to say that, that's not the case. This thing you see here are a list of sample data that we have picked up to give you an idea of what the data looks like. Sometimes you may think, oh, this is, this thing is a description, and not the description is pretty, self-explanatory. But you look at something like this, fiscal category, and you don't know what kind of values it has, or has line item, has true. So you look at this. This is just to give you an idea of what kind of data each of this what we call the data pills, what type of data they have, right? So it is not the first record that you're going to process. It's just sample data. The other thing is that I want to point out is that whenever you look at any of these fields or any of these things on the left side, and so just to look at basic thing here. Let's just start with this one. So when you look at it, you know, whenever you're opening up an action, you're doing something. So Salesforce, search objects, contact, you know, and then I'm doing account ID. I'm giving in the account ID. So this thing, all of this data that is coming up from Salesforce is coming from the schema that is defined for contact, right? And that's true with most applications, almost all applications. You know, they are giving us the schema for an object. So whether it's a contact in Salesforce or an invoice in QuickBooks or a NetSuite sales order, you know, we are asking the application, tell me what objects you have. So here it is telling us, you know, all of these objects are, for example, available. And so it's not hard-coded in our system. You know, we are asking the application to say what objects you have and what fields do you have in that object. So, and that's the schema that comes back from the application. And so what you typically get, you know, is, so this is one way of getting it. And, you know, if you want to add additional fields, there's always this thing called add, remove optional fields. Some people overlook it and then they say, hey, where's I want to do my account name, but I don't see it here, right? So you can always go here and you can look for name and you can say first name, last name, you know, full name, etc. And then once you select that, that shows up, right? So that's how you expose the fields from the schema on this side, on the input side of the UI. And this side is telling you where the data, what data is available for mapping, right? What can I put in here? So on this side, you know, this is, you know, in Workato parlance is called data tree. So the data tree consists of all the different sources that the data came from. So in the first, you know, before you start anything, we give you by default your account information. So what's your user ID, what's your username, email, etc., etc. And these are the account properties that you have defined. And then at any point in time, you'll see all the previous data elements or objects that you have retrieved. So in this particular case, the trigger output was this new opportunity. So I can see what came out from new opportunity. Now here, it shows you everything, right? It shows you every single field. You don't, like on this side, you have to expose the fields that you wanted to add data to. On this side, you don't have to do anything like that. And you can search for things like, you know, I can say name here, and it'll show there's one name. If I say ID, it'll probably say, you know, there are many IDs, account ID, campaign ID, and so on. And like I said before, you know, it's got the data type next to it. So there's the ABC and the 00 and so on, date and so on. There's another special thing that I want to point out on this side is this thing called, you know, extended objects. So by default, you know, all it has in the opportunity, if you look at Salesforce opportunity, if you go and look at it in Salesforce, all you'll see is this account ID. What we try to do in many cases, not everywhere, okay, so that's not everywhere, but in many cases, especially for Salesforce, what we do is this thing called extension of the schema, or also called, some people refer to it as schema stitching. So we look at the ID and it says, we know about this account ID. That means he's talking about the account object. So let me go and fetch the account information. You know, so I basically is doing a join of the account, and it's making these fields available to you. And some of these fields are not stitched, but they are in the element itself. But you know, but you can see in many places you have this. So all of them are not schema stitching, but you know, some of them are just you know, complex objects. So those are the, you know, the data elements. You know, what type of data it is, what is the schema, how to search for it. So you can find more here. You can find the exact elements you want to here, and you can search for it. And then sometimes you have this schema stitching available to you, where you can express your formulas by taking elements from the, you know, extended object that is associated with the main object. So in this case, our opportunity is extended using the account object, right? So that's a very basic you know, lay of the land of how things work. Now, in some cases, there is no app involved. One case is CSV. So when we are dealing with CSV, we expect you to give the schema. So you will, let me just show you something here. It'll be similar to this, but let me just open this up. So in the trigger, for example, you have these two additional fields. So one is called so-called where clause and field list. So in the case of CSVs, normally you give the field list to define what fields exist. So you will say, first column is column ID, second column is names, third column is states, fourth is phone number, etc. If you're defining a contact list, so you will have to give the list because we don't know what your CSV exists, what your CSV consists of. So that's one case. The second case is in the case of HTTP. If you're making HTTP requests, we expect you to give us the schema, the output schema for the data that is going to come out. And typically you can just do, if you're doing things at HTTP level, you probably know how to get the output schema. You can do a curl and then take one of those outputs. Just make sure that the output is enough, is long enough to capture all the definitions that are there in that response. So sometimes it may be too big, you can chop it off to make it smaller, but make sure that it has enough definition for us to infer what the schema looks like. Now, since I opened this up, let me also talk about a few things here. So by default, if I look at it here, you can see that it is giving me all the fields that are there in the opportunity. Sometimes I don't want that, right? Sometimes I want to be more efficient. So what to help with that, in many of the applications, like Salesforce is there, QuickBase, it's there. I think in some of the other applications, like I think in ServiceNow also it's now there. I think Jira also has it. So what we allow is this some kind of a query to make the search more efficient, so it doesn't hit us. It doesn't hit Workato. Before it hits us, we get the information. And then in addition to that, we allow you to put in a field list. So now if I put only 2-3 fields here, in the schema that I showed you, down below, you'll see only a few of those fields, right? So here you will see, instead of seeing all of this, you will see only account ID, like whatever fields I put in, account ID, account name, etc. Not account ID, opportunity ID, maybe account ID. I can just filter it out by that. So that's how you can filter out. So sometimes you may, if you're debugging someone else's formula or looking at your own and you've forgotten why things are not showing up, it is possible that hidden in here, maybe it is hidden. No, it probably not be hidden, but you've not noticed it because it's, if it is in this way, you cannot see it. But it's possible that you have put in some filter conditions or some, limited the list of fields that you can display by putting in some constraints, and that's why you're not seeing it. And the most common reason why you don't see things here, and this is also very common, I've heard people talk about it, is that I don't see the fields here. And the reason for that is, they're hidden in here, and if you want to, you can get them out. In the case of the search, for example, you don't really need the field name, so I can take that out. But the point is that you could expose all of these things here. Like instead of a search, if it was an update and I wanted to update only 4 fields, it's better to have only those 4 fields. Okay. So many times, no, not many times, but sometimes. So in general, when you're doing this mapping, let's say that this is a simple, log message, you can just do mapping like this. What I did is I just typed it in, and I just so here, I'll just show you how. I just type that in, and I can put in the account ID from there, and that's it. I just click on it. Some people drag it, you don't need to drag it. You can just click on it and it'll come over. And that's all. This is the very basic form of mapping. This is my input field. This is the data this is where I want my data to go. and these are all the places from where I can get my information. I can get it from here, or I can get it from the one below. It doesn't matter. And as you can see, it is adding one after the other, right? Which is not something, you have to be careful about that, because sometimes I've noticed that, if I click it, in some way, you see, like that, I clicked it too hard, and it shows up with 2, and you'll find that, you'll end up with, multiple. Your data will look wrong because it has 2 of those. So what it is doing by default here is a simple data mapping, right? So here, this is a ABC, which is a text field, and I have put different types of fields here. This was a account ID was a text field. The amount is a number field. If you look at it here, the amount was a float number field. The date was a date field, and the phone was a phone field. So it doesn't care, what it does, it does an implicit transformation, or casting of the data, right? So automatically it says, okay, this is an amount, I'll make it appear in a displayable format because it's in a text field, or text field here. I will make it into a displayable format, and same thing with date and phone number. Now, so there's no formula involved here, just simple. This is the simplest of mappings that you can get. But only thing that you can see here is that I can go one after the other, right? I can just write in whatever I want, right? I can just do whatever I want here. It doesn't matter. And I can keep multiple fields, and I can add 2 fields next to each other. So I can say home phone number and maybe another phone number, and it will show me all of those. So assistant's phone. So I can just put comma, and no formatting required, right? It's just the way, any way you want it, you can put it. Doesn't matter. So that's the simplest of the mappings, and all you're doing is moving things from the right side to the left side, right? So it is easy to map, but sometimes it may not be in a what it doesn't have, it doesn't give you the ability to play with the data, to manipulate the data. For example, this create date, if I want to show it in a much better format, I don't have that ability, right? I cannot mix and match. Another thing I want to just point out, although it says text here, it may not always be text, so this side may not always be text. This is what is saying what the type of the field is. This is ABC. This could have been a number field, for example, right? So let me just show you what I mean. So that is a little bit of a misnomer. So let's just get a number field. Let's say phone. So phone is a phone type field, but it says text. It's actually not text. It's just saying that I'm not using any formulas. When I'm in this mode, I'm not using any formula. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that it's a text mode, right? So that's just to know. So that's the basic text mapping, where I don't use formula. When you want to use formulas, what you have to do is, let's just take all of this out. Is this down below? Let's do simple formula. Let's just add another one. Utilities, log. And when I want to do a formula, the first thing I'd want to do is, I want to, let's say I want to do this account ID. Now, the way to expose the formula mode is to click on this one. It goes into formula mode. And now you see that on this side, it has become FX instead of, it was previously it was ABC. So now it has become FX. So now it's telling you that you press, you have to not press dot, but it's just you just have to enter dot here, and it gives you all the possible types of things you can do with this thing. So with this account ID, you can do all of these formulas that are possible, right? So this is a good way. And if you want to say, hey, what is Jisub? You can just click on it, and it'll tell you what Jisub means, right? So the Jisub is a substitution pattern, global substitution that it is doing. And so anytime you want to do any of those things, you can just click on it and see what it is. And so you can see all of these types of formulas which are there. So that's how you expose what formulas are there. So the two things that you have to do when number one is this is you just click on formula, and then you have to add this you have to click on this dot. You have to enter a dot to expose the formulas that are available. Of course, if you know, you can just start typing it out, and it'll tell you what it matches, right? So that's that's how you do the formulas. Now if I look at different types of formulas that I can use, the simplest ones are what I call the the basic type conversion formulas, right? So now you can see here that I'm in formula mode. It says fx here, and the first one I have done. Now the other thing, when you're in formula mode and you're doing string concatenation, you can use the plus. You must use the plus, right? So account ID plus account ID plus. This one says new line, so I'm saying new line plus amount, etc. Now here are the type conversions which are going on. So I'm saying amount, and although it did it implicitly, without you having to do it, but here I'm saying 2s, which means convert it to two string. So here, if I look at it, there, if I put 2, you'll see all of these different the type conversion kind of formulas which show up. To 2f is to transform it to a float, to integer, to currency, to phone, to string. Then there are all these other ones which we will cover later on. So then there's to date, which I use later on, and so on. And for the advanced people, you can do a lot of other things which are to hex, to JSON, to param. These are all important when you're dealing with more complex things, especially if you're dealing with HTTP and so on. You have to do some of this. There are some other ones which I'm going to cover. If time permits, we'll try to cover some of these things. But there's some, if you do the 2_, you'll see all these different transformation formulas which are type conversion or or code conversion. So type to state code, for example, is it says if you give it to state code, then you can so for example, if you put in California, California will be converted to CA. So that's the two-digit standardized code. Similarly, there are other ones like to country. Let's do alpha 2. So here, if you do so internationally, there are there are some ISO standards. So there is a three-digit code and there's a two-digit code. So IND is the three-digit code for India, and is the two-digit code is IN. Similarly, if you do if you do country name, I can convert it from GB to United Kingdom, GBR to United Kingdom, and so on, right? So it's a so whenever you're looking, you're looking at something and say, I wonder if I can convert it to something else. Go and do a .to, and chances are that you will find something that is out of the box there, right? If it is not there, of course, you'll have to do some manipulation, but by default it's already there. So all of these things are there. So that's the the first level of mapping. The simplest thing that you can do in a mapping is just simple map, and then after that is a type conversion or a code conversion kind of mapping. So the next thing that is important in mappings is this thing which is conditional expressions. Sometimes you say, I will do this only if the data is of a certain kind. So here I'm saying, I'm looking at the message, from this previous one, and it says, if the message includes an account, the literal called account, then I will say it is found. Otherwise, I'll print out not found, right? So what's the syntax? So you're saying, you're putting in the data element that you're applying this on top of. Then you're using this formula, and then you give the conditions. If it requires a condition, you give the input parameters. And then the two things after that, which are very important, is one is you have to put this question mark, right? And so you're saying that, okay, so the result of this is a true or a false. Does it include or doesn't it include, right? It's a true or false. So depending on that, so this question mark implies that, if it is true or false, the first case is the true case, right? So this is where, and you can, have hard-coded it to found. I could have put in another pill from somewhere else, right? I can just, it's just, you can put any element there. It could be another formula, for example. And then the second thing which is important is this colon. So this is saying if this is the true case and this is the false case, right? So I have to say colon false case, right? And so there are tons of these include kind of formulas. Let me show you some. So if you say include, then there's always the opposite, which is exclude. So exclude, if it doesn't have this field, it is going to be true. Then there is, I think there's something called match. So there's match, which is, and the other thing to notice is that these are all case sensitives, right? So if you want to compare it, sometimes what I do is I will do a down case on it. Down match. So I'll do a down case, and then I'll do the match. So if I'm not sure of what the, what it is going to be coming out as, and then I can just say, account, lowercase. So I don't care what the input was. I just convert it to down case, and then, it should match account. So I'm just looking for the values, not this case, because all of these things, like I said, are case sensitive, right? So there's a match, there's include, exclude, there is also begins with. I think there's begins with. So if you want to say, did I put? I think it's all messed up now. Okay, so I can say begins with, but it's not showing it. There used to be one begins with or ends with. Oh, okay, so this is maybe that ends with. So ends with is there, and I think begin with is also there. I don't know why it's not showing up. Yeah, I think it's there, but it's not showing up. Begins with. So ends with definitely is there. I think there is a begins with also, but it's not showing up for some reason. So similarly, so it's basically saying, if this is true, if it begins with, let's say, AC, maybe you have some convention going on and you say, I will only process things that begin with certain thing, right? Then you can say it begins with, and ends with also similarly. You can say if it ends with a .com, then I'll process it in a certain way. Then there are some special ones, which is, there is a present. And present basically means that if there is any value that is coming in, then do something, right? So then I can do the same thing. I think I started with that. So if say true, false, right? I can do that. There's another variant of present. So all of these things that I'm showing you, in this portion are what I'm calling the conditional formulas, right? Begins with, present, include, match, etc. So they will always return true or false. Now there is one which is different. So there is one called presence. And so what presence does is it will return you the value if there is a value, it will return you the value. So when presence comes, you can say message.presence, then I will use the message itself, or I can say or like that, or I can say or like this, and or none. So that'll be how you'll do it. So these are all of these, these the ones I'm showing you, these are the commonly used ones. Very, very useful. If you master all the formulas that I'm showing you today, I think you'll get through like 98% of all of your formulas, all of your recipes. There are always the other ones which are more complicated, but for everyday use, you don't need any of these things. So those are conditional expressions. Then this one is a more complicated one. And here I'm showing you some of these things where, this is the same kind of a thing, but here I'm showing you some date conversion formulas and some phone conversion formulas. Not phone conversion, but I don't think I'm showing you the phone conversion, but to phone, for example, does that. But here you get the idea that how complicated a formula can become. So here I'm saying, plus this, plus this, plus this, plus this. And in the middle, you can see that I've also put in comments, right? This is also very important to know that. So I can just, in the middle of the formula, I can say converts to time zone, and I've given a bit.ly link. You can go to this and see what are the different, time zone parameters that you can use, right? So you can give, so especially, the whole idea is that we should be able to make these things very easily, right? So here you can see all the different, this is actually STRF time formula, but so you can, the idea is that you can put in all the comments and help text that you need inside the formula itself. We've talked about 3 ways of doing that. One is at the level of the action, one is at the level of the recipe, and the third is at the level of the formula. You can put it in here, and so someone looking at it, they know what the heck is going on. So why did they say US specific? What does this mean, right? So in time zone is something that converts a given date into a time zone that you specify, for example, right? But and so on. So STRF time is a very heavily used, if you're doing any date formatting, STRF time is a very heavily used function, and that's the one which came up here. And so it has all these different parameters that you can use for STRF time, and it gives you a lot of flexibility in how you want to display your time, or sometimes not only to display time, sometimes the other system, the other app requires the date time to be passed in a certain format, so you have to do this formatting. So this is, if you're doing any date time thing, you should definitely master this STRF time functionality. And for NetSuite users, those the in time zone and STRF time become important, because NetSuite is very, very finicky about how you pass time. So those are important ones to keep in mind. Also, this one comes in if you're doing with, if you're dealing with calendars, Google Calendar and so on. These two functions become pretty important. So then, in terms of text formatting, let me just do some. Let's just take one of the inputs from one of the previous steps. So some of the simplest things in text formatting. So now, we talked about the type conversion. Then we talked about the conditional elements. So you do things only if certain conditions are true. So those are like, irrespective of what type of data it is, whether it's a number or a text or a date or anything else, it doesn't matter. Those things always apply. But then you come to each of these different types, and there is different formulas available for each type. So for the simplest ones, for text, for the one I use the most is this thing called a split. So I'll get a string and I want to split it into a certain way, and I can apply split after split, on top of this. So I can say split, and then I can say, split by account. And what it'll do is it'll split it and give me a set of elements separated by account. In this case, there's only one account, so it'll give me account. So I can say last, which will be everything after that account literal, or I can say first, right? And so all of these things, some of these things are not kind of explained here, like first, last, etc. Things that you know, but I think we should do a better documentation on some of these things. The question is, like, where do you put it? So the first and last, basically, it refers to array processing. So when you do a split, it actually creates an array with multiple elements, right? So when I'm doing the first, it's saying give me the first element of that array. So and then I can do a split last, and then I can say another split, and then I can do something else, like I can say if it has a date, and then give me the one after that, right? So split is very heavily used. The other one that is especially for printing purposes and all, the other three are capitalize. It'll convert it to sentence case, which is, if I just go in here, if the first word, the first letter of the word is capitalized. Then another one is titleize, I think, which you can, especially when you're doing, emailing and stuff from the recipes, and the names don't always come in properly. You can do titleize, and this will do, Bob and then Smith, and it'll both will start with the same capital letter. So Bob Smith will appear nicely instead of the generic email, which may show, all in lowercase and stuff. So titleize is also important. I use it quite often. Then there's another one, I showed you downcase, but there's another one called upcase. So upcase will make it everything uppercase, right? So these are again heavily used by me. There's some other ones I use to strip off empty spaces. So what happens sometimes is when you get data from some systems, they will give it to you with spaces, trailing or what is it called, in the front, you may have spaces. So that is okay for that system, but the system you're passing it to, the application you're passing it to, may not like it. So you'll get a runtime error. So the way to kind of avoid that is to do a strip. So strip will take away any spaces from the front or the back, right? If you know it is only at the back, then you can do an R strip, which is removes at the end of the string, which is on the right hand side, right? So this is typically the case, where there will be trailing spaces at the end. And this also happens if you're chopping off, like, there's another formula, like, let's say that I don't like this one, so it's too long for me. I can just do ... 19, so it'll chop it to 20 characters. Now the 20th character may be a space, right? So then I don't want to have that space go forward, or to the other system, so I can do an L strip on this, R strip. And there's a similar reason for doing L strip. Sometimes I don't use L strip as much, but I normally just use R strip, which takes off spaces from beginning to end. So those are, these are quite useful for, especially for, text processing. There's another one which is heavily used by people, and that one is called this, is this thing called Jisub. It's very powerful. So Jisub lets you substitute a string with other strings, right? So you can see here examples: Jean Mary, Jisub, J with M, so with Mean Mary, so and so on. So so Jisub is a very powerful function, and again, it applies only to texts, right? It doesn't apply to numbers or dates or fonts, etc. So those are some of the text formulas, popularly used text formulas. There are other ones, slice and etc., but not very heavily used. You can chop off things just by doing that format. Let's take a number one. So when I do a number, you'll see that there are these other types of things which came up, right? We talked about some of these logical ones, blank presents, etc. But there's this abs, there's round, there is two currency, two float, two phone, to string, etc. So of course, the first thing you can do with a number formula is this. You can do that, or you can do a minus b, right? Or you can do multiply, or you can do divide, right? So these are all the standard ones. And then you can do percentage, which is it'll give you only the remainder, right? So this will give you only the remainder. And then the abs that we saw just before, absolute, it'll give you the absolute value. So if it is negative 145, it becomes 145, right? And so on. And then if I can do similarly, I can do round. Let's say that the amount was like this one, 11.99, it'll become 11. I should have thought it'll be 11. It should have been rounded up to 12. I don't know what the answer is actually. So 11.49 is 11.5. That makes sense. This should have rounded up to 12. So round is another one that you can use. And similarly, there are date formulas that you can use. Let's pick a date. And again, I can see a whole bunch of date formulas. So some of these, beginning of day, beginning of hour, beginning of month, beginning of week, these are also useful, like, and in combination with things. And I think, our documentation, we have some which are quite interesting. So for example, you are in the middle of the month and you say, tell me the first date of the month, right? Or the last date of the month. So last date of the month is interesting. I think in the doc, there's an example of how to do that. So you go to the next month and then you go back. So there's some, there's some way to do that. Then there is the simple ones, the to date. So you got a string and you want to convert it to a date. We talked about strf time. Sometimes you want to do these things, 2i, 2s. So the 2i, from date to 2i, normally we do, if you're trying to compare two dates, sometimes I'll just convert it to 2i and then make the, compare the two. And then, convert to UTC, returns the day of the week. Sometimes if you're, printing out something, this kind of thing is useful. Year of the day, the day of the year, and week, returns the week of the year. These are also useful. These are mostly useful when you're doing, some formatting and saying, and writing out something and says, you placed an order on X date and is 7, or you want to see so many days have passed since the first day. Oh, that's another thing. So you can also do these kind of things. So you can do close date plus a minus close date, etc. It'll give you, so if you do this, it'll give it to you in seconds, for example, right? Same thing with plus. You can do plus and then it'll give it to you in seconds. You can also do some other kind of calculations. So you can say 2 dot. So let's say that I want to add 2 more days to this. So you can say 2 days, or I can say 2 weeks, or I can say 2 months. Since we are doing all of them, I'll say 2 years. So all of these are possible. So you can add days to it, years, months, etc. So those are all possible. Now, so there's some more, but these are the common ones. I think this one is very popular. The adding dates to it. So I have a 30-day, invoicing. I have due in 30, so I can get the date, the close date, and then I can add 30 days to it. So I can say 30 days, and then that'll be my date on which the invoice becomes due, and so on. So those are some of the formulas. Then I want to also, some new things came out. Let me just show you how that. Let me just create a new one. Action. Let's say I want to create Salesforce. Create object, and I want to do sell opportunity. So here, let's say I want to add, let's say I'll add all. So we have this new thing, which, let's say that you want to, let's say the quantity was not there because this is optional, right? So, but I wanted to multiply the quantity. So the original thing would have been something like this, right? So I want to say amount amount. Okay, why not? So let's use amount, and I say amount I want to multiply by 1.2, something like that. So if amount was not present, it is going to give me a problem. So I can do if amount dot present. First I have to go to formula mode. Present, and then I can say if amount is present, then I want to do amount times 1.2. Right. Now what do I want to do if it is not present? I can say or I want to do 0. Maybe that's what I want to do. Or I can say leave it as I can say leave it as null. So actually in this case it's not very appropriate, but let's say that this was an update. I think it's not very good. Let me just do an update instead of a create. Let's say update. So let's say I'm updating an existing object, and if the value is not there, I want to leave it as is. Where did it go? No, not this one. Did I say search? Update object, opportunity. And I want to get all of them. And let's say that, same thing here. I just wanted to get the amount. And if the amount was present, again, formula mode, present, then I want to use amount times 1.2. The other thing, I forgot that you have to give that question mark to say that this is what's the result of this. This is what is saying. The true part is this, and from the other part, which is if it is false, what do I do? I can say 0. I can say skip. It's a special word called skip. So skip means that you skip this field. I will not do anything about it, right? So leave the data as is, don't touch it. Or I could say clear. So these two, skip and clear, are something that came out recently because people have been trying to figure out, how, if I don't want to modify it, if the data did not come in, how do I handle with it? So these two things came in recently. In fact, probably last night. So clears this field in the destination app if applicable, right? So if there was nothing in the amount that was passed in from the input, I want to just blow out the data that was there in the existing record. And if I say skip, that means leave it as is. Whatever data it had, leave it like that, and don't touch it, right? If the input was not there. So that's about it. I just wanted to cover this much. There, again, formulas and transformations is a very huge topic. So, I'm sure you'll have other questions, and if you can always reach back to us or go to these resources for, both in the support and the docs. At this time, Zan, if there are any questions, I can take the questions.
It all looks okay. There's no question so far.
All right. Good. Thank you very much. Zan, is there anything else you want to do? I think the next session is 2 weeks from now. What was the topic? I don't recall, but I think we'll send it out. But if you have any topics that you'd want to cover, please send us a note and we will cover it. Or you can put it in the forum. maybe that's not a bad place. You can just put it in the forum requesting, or just send us a note. Just send us a note that you would want to cover some topics. Hope this was useful, and thank you again.